Hey everyone, how's it going? Today's a pretty special video. I'm going to be cleaning this Halo 4 Xbox 360. This is my fiance's, and as you can see, it's very dirty and is long overdue for a cleaning. To my knowledge, I don't think it has ever been cleaned, so it's probably going to be pretty disgusting inside. During the course of this video, I'm going to be playing some of my favorite songs from the Halo games. I was originally going to just do songs from Halo 4, since it's a Halo 4 Xbox, but I decided against that because while I was listening to the Halo 4 soundtrack, I remembered how much I hate it. There's honestly only a few songs that I like in that soundtrack. So I'm just going to be playing my favorites from all the games. So as you can see here, I'm just removing this little grill piece on the bottom. And then we're going to be doing the same on the other side. If you've never taken apart a 360 before, it's a little bit difficult for your first time, or it might be, but I mean, it's pretty easy to figure out. Just watch a guide, and I mean, you could even watch this if you're wanting to do it for yourself. I feel like I went pretty in depth with this one. As you can see here, there's a lot of dust layered in this grill piece. This amount of dirtiness is normal for a console that's this old. This particular model released in 2012 when Halo 4 came out. So, I mean, that's just normal play. It's definitely gonna get dusty over time. This particular piece is difficult to get out every single time you take an Xbox 360 apart for the first time, because it's plastic weld, and I mean, you literally have to break that weld in order to get this piece out, and it takes a lot of elbow grease, to be honest, but once you get it done the first time, it's gonna make it easier taking it apart in the future. You'll also want to, once you get it out, try and get the pieces out of this spot as best you can. That way, once you put it back together, it'll go back together better. And it also, if you don't remove that stuff, I learned this the hard way, that piece could get stuck in there again and make it hard to get it back out. So as long as you clean up that area really well, it'll make it a lot easier. And we're going to do the same thing on this other side. Personally, I found this one harder to get out because if I remember right, there's less spots that you can pry on to break that weld. But again, same with this side. As long as you break that stuff and clean it up well, then it's going to make it much easier next time you take it apart. And just to clarify, you're not actually damaging the console itself when you're doing this. It's literally just like a buildup of plastic right there from where it's literally called plastic weld from where they bonded it to that spot. So you're just breaking it so you can get it out, but you're not actually damaging the console. It's not going to hurt anything. Unfortunately, though, that is the only way that you can get these pieces out. And you'll be able to see right here, this is the part that I was struggling the most with. This part was definitely harder. And I apologize that I didn't get it, but I had to take the rest of it off camera because I was struggling so much. And now that those are out, you're going to have these trim pieces on each side, the chrome that you can see. And they just have these tabs that you can pull on a little bit from the bottom and they'll just come right off. These ones aren't too bad, but there are a couple of the tabs that are a little bit hard to reach. I'm using an iFixit tool here. It made it a little bit easier. Just a little bit of a hook tool you can get down in there and underneath it. And I was struggling getting these two tabs off, so here you can see I used a very, very small screwdriver. You got to be careful doing that though. Be easy with it, because if you're using a metal tool, it can make it a little easier to break those tabs. So just be extra careful if you're gonna use a metal tool like I did. And again, we're going to do the same thing on this side. This side has less tabs than the other side did. The tabs on this side were a lot easier to reach too, in my opinion. I think the other side was just more difficult because the hard drive cage is right there. Next, we're going to take out this Wi-Fi card. That's just how it communicates with everything wireless. I believe it was a T10 Torx bit, and it's just the one screw, and it just pulls straight out. And hopefully you can see that well, but it's just a USB that plugs straight into the board. So now I'm going to be taking the actual shell apart. Again, there's tabs on this. These ones are a little bit harder. There's one that you can't even reach. As you can see here, you have to poke a hole in the warranty seal just to even get it to open. And you have to cut that warranty seal in half in order to get it to split apart, because it goes over the edge of both sides of it. These iFixit pry tools, the ones that are the blue ones, they look like guitar picks or something. They work really well holding that stuff while I'm not able to reach it and hold it that whole time. And I apologize that I wasn't able to capture me taking those off on camera. That was another thing that I was really struggling with. Now I'm just going to be removing these screws. These are what hold the other side of the shell onto the console. I can't remember for sure, but I believe that these screws are either T8 or T10 Torx bits. I believe they're T8 though. Once you get all those screws removed, this should literally just pop right off. You have to be careful though, because as you can see there's a ribbon cable that comes out from the front of it, and it might be easy to tear if you're not very careful with it. So just watch that as you're pulling that away from it. So the inside was very dirty, and the compressed air can wouldn't even blow most of it out. So I had to do a lot of scrubbing with isopropyl alcohol. The compressed air can did help some, but when you're working with something that's this dirty, I recommend trying to use an actual air compressor, since it'll hold more pressure if you have access to one, because it'll definitely do a better job of blowing everything out. I will say the isopropyl alcohol does a really good job of getting the dirt up for the most part, but you're definitely going to go through quite a bit of cotton balls and potentially cotton swabs. The good thing about it though is they're really cheap, and it's not a huge deal if you use a bunch of them. It's just, if it's this dirty, you're going to go through a lot trying to get everything out. And I just used 50% isopropyl alcohol on all the plastic pieces, but I highly recommend using at least 91%, or you can even go higher than that if you want. But if you're going to be cleaning like the motherboard and stuff, definitely use that higher percentage, because there's less water concentration in it, and it's a lot less likely to damage your components. So this here that I'm cleaning is the internal speaker. That's another component that you want to be careful with. Just don't press too hard on it, because you could poke a hole in it. But that's just what makes like the little dings or whatever whenever you're booting it up or whenever you're opening the disk tray and stuff. And everything else on this board I'm just going to kind of go over. It's very dirty, as you're about to see here in a second. Quite a bit of dirt on there. This part kind of took a little while, just because you have a lot of resistors and chips and whatever else that you kind of have to maneuver around. But just whenever you're doing this, just try to get the dirt off as best as you can. It's not going to be perfect, but anything's better than nothing. Next, I'm going to be taking off this processor cooler. This was definitely the dirtiest part. Usually on stuff like this, anywhere that there's airflow is usually going to be the dirtiest part of the whole thing though. And this console had this really weird like orange goop in this. I have no idea what it is, if it's just corrosion on the copper. I'm not entirely sure, so if anybody knows, please let me know in the comments down below. This stuff was really difficult to get out too though. I had to pour a little bit of alcohol in there and let it soak for a little bit, and I tried to scrape it off as best as I could. I got most of it out, but it wasn't perfect. I just scraped out as much as I could, and then from there I just tried to clean up whatever was left in there with some Q-tips. Like I said, I also sprayed some isopropyl alcohol in there. It didn't help as good as I hoped it would, but it was better than nothing. I genuinely have no idea what this stuff was, but it was disgusting. Next, I'm going to take off this board on the front. This is just for the power button and all the LEDs for it and stuff. This board's just held in by 2 screws. I believe these are a T8 as well. Next, I'm going to take out these 4 screws here. These screw into the bottom of the heatsink. There's an X clamp under there, but these screws are what holds the motherboard into this metal tray. These screws are very tiny, so be extra careful not to lose those. I have this magnet pad that you can see on the side that I put all my screws on, that way I don't lose them. There's also these additional screws here that need removed in order to get the motherboard out. These were kind of a pain to remember where they went as I was putting them back in, but it's not super hard. Again, if you're watching a video guide or whatever, just double check in the video and make sure you're putting them all back in the right place. You'll also want to be sure to remove this screw here on the side. That's what holds the hard drive tray in place. In order to completely take the tray out, you'll have to remove this SATA cable from the board. It's kind of difficult to get out of there, so you'll have to pull on it pretty hard. There's also another cable directly underneath it, and once both of those are out, you can just pull it straight out. And you'll also pull this piece out that helps hold the disk drive in there good. I just unhooked the speaker from the board as well, and now you should be able to pull it straight out. I struggled to get this X clamp out for quite a while. I know it's going to look easy in this video, but believe me, I cut out a lot of footage of me trying to pull it off. As soon as you pull that piece off though, the heatsink just comes right off. Here I tried cleaning more of that gunk out just the best I could, just trying to get as little as whatever's left in there out as I could. Here I'm going to clean this fan. You're not probably going to be able to get the fan completely clean, but again, just try and get off as much dirt and dust as you possibly can. Try and get it as clean as you can, that way you won't have to clean it again for a long time. I was able to get it pretty clean. It definitely wasn't perfect, but it was better than I thought I'd be able to get it. And here again, I'm just trying to get as much dirt and dust off of these other components as I can. Right now I'm cleaning the parts of the I/O shield off. The motherboard, you're definitely not going to get perfectly clean unless you want to sit there and take 3 hours to completely just clean every single little bit of it. Now that I have the board clean, I'm just going to slide it back into this metal tray. One big thing is you will definitely want to make sure that you get everything plugged in before you put it all back together. Because if not, you're going to have to completely tear it apart again and plug everything back in from there. Now I'm just going to screw the fan back on. It's only the 2 screws on there. Another big thing to try to watch out for when you're putting it back together is try not to over tighten any of the screws. It's not always a super big deal if you do, but sometimes if you do, you can end up breaking. If you're screwing into a plastic piece, you can break it, or it could even affect your performance, so just be careful with that. And the reason I say it could affect your performance is, let's say you over tighten one of the screws on the fan and it breaks the screw hole on it. If you've only got 1 screw on there, that's going to leave your fan to flop around as you're moving the console. Or if the fan kicks on real high, it could move it, and then that fan's not going to be directly over that heatsink, which is going to draw a lot more heat. Now I'm just putting these 4 small screws back in. You'll want to make sure you get this piece back in too. It helps hold your disc tray in place, but I'm almost positive it helps with noise reduction too. So just make sure that you get that back in place. And it's held in by one of these screws that I'm putting in right now. I don't remember which one. This is another aspect where you definitely don't want to over tighten these screws, because these screws are going straight through the motherboard. The big problem there is if you accidentally break something on the motherboard by over tightening, you're pretty much screwed, because it's probably not going to work how it's supposed to. Now I'm going to put this board back into place. There's 2 screws on this one too. It's also important to make sure that this fan shroud gets back into place. Next, we're putting the disc tray back in place as well. Make sure you get both cords plugged back into this as well. There's the SATA connector, and I believe it's an 8-pin connector, but it's important that both get plugged in, otherwise your disc tray is not going to work. Next, I'm going to clean the inside of the shell. It's important on a regular console just to make sure that there's less dust and dirt in there, but it's especially important on this console since it's see-through. It's definitely going to look a lot better once we get it all cleaned out. This part of the shell is definitely the hardest side to clean, just because you have the grill for the fan on this side, and I mean, it's definitely hard to get that part in particular cleaned. The rest is pretty easy, you just swipe over it. You can see there was actually quite a bit of dirt on this outside part of the shell, but it all cleaned up pretty well. And there was also some like crusty stuff on there, but it came off pretty easily. By the way, I highly recommend only using the 50% isopropyl alcohol on these plastic pieces, especially on the outside, because if you use any higher than 50%, it's going to leave a weird residue. And this still does a little bit, but you can just take a dry cotton ball after you're done and run it over it, and it'll get the majority of it off, and it'll look good. Here I'm just trying to scrape off as much of that residue as I can. The majority of it came up. There was still a little bit that was left on there, but I got most of it off. You'll want to make sure to clean these edges out real good too. That's where a lot of the dirt likes to hide. I found that cotton swabs worked the best for using on these edges. And as you can see, it looks much better than it did. And then here I'm just doing some touch up, just trying to get it to look as the best that I can. Now we're going to move on to cleaning the metal shield. You'll be able to see as I clean this that there was a ton of dirt on this. And you'll actually be able to see where the fan holes are. There's some rust or something where it has apparently drawn moisture over time. But I tried to get as much of that off as I could too. And I actually did most of the cleaning for this metal shield off camera. And then the plastic cover has a little hook thing on it where the metal shield hooks into it, and then it just sits right back on top again. Now I'm putting these long screws back in to hold the shell in place. Next, I'm going to try to clean this front piece as best as I can. This front piece actually really wasn't that dirty. It needed cleaned, but it wasn't as bad as I expected it to be. So when you're putting this back on, you're gonna want to make sure that that ribbon cable gets plugged back in, and also make sure that those tabs get back into place where they're supposed to be. So this side was the easiest to clean, just because there's not a whole lot that you have to clean around. It still took a little while, but not nearly as long as the other ones. This part's pretty easy to get back into place too. You just have to make sure that all the tabs are lined up and clicked into place. Now I'm doing some more touch-ups and cleaning any fingerprints that I left behind on it. It's also pretty important that you make sure that you get the network card plugged back in. The last thing we're going to do is make sure both ends get put back together, and I hope you guys enjoy the reveal.